Folks, they said it wouldn't happen. The chances were slim to none. But we proved them wrong. It's June again. He's a good kid, don't tell him. That means it's time again for a theme month. And this time I got a real good one. It's so good, there's 3 of them. I couldn't decide what to do this month, so I'm making it all your guys' problems. Think of the next 3 weeks as a contest between 3 theme months that I was very excited about because they had funny names that I absolutely could not deliver on. The theme of this theme month is theme months. F*** you. The first of our 3 contestants was the one I wish I could have made work the most. Welcome to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. A month where I'm only allowed to play games that feature Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I thought he would have been in a few more games. He's in like 3 of them. What the hell is he doing in Age of Empires 2? Dwayne Johnson had a life before becoming a pro wrestler, but he wasn't a Rock yet, so does that really count as living? Born to professional wrestler Soul Man Rocky Johnson, and member of the famous Anawahi wrestling family, Ata Maivia, The Rock was born into wrestling, despite his best efforts to do lamer sports like rugby and football. After being cut from the Canadian Football League, The Rock would start his wrestling career in 1996, though it wouldn't be for the WWF, which had scouted him, and he wouldn't be The Rock yet, starting out in the smaller USWA promotion as Flex Kavana. Dwayne would do alright for himself in the USWA, winning their tag team championship twice, before being called up to the WWF with a lot of pressure. Weeks of promos hyping him up as a third-generation athlete, son and grandson to 2 wrestling greats, even taking their names to form his own, Rocky Maivia. His debut was set to be in a featured bout at Survivor Series, a Big 4 pay-per-view. His very first match in the WWF was Sink or Swim. He would disappoint his namesake and not sink, looking decent despite obviously being no Goldust. Everybody wants to be Goldust. Quickly though, Rocky Maivia would go from a plucky blue chipper who fought for good, to a saccharine cartoon character who would receive death threats every time he walked through the curtain. Wrestling in the mid-90s was defined by edgy content. Both WCW and ECW, the other major American wrestling promotions, had embraced that. Hulk Hogan wasn't eating his vitamins and saying his prayers. He was smoking penises with his boys and spray No! ECW took it even further. You tuned in there and you'd see Sandman shotgunning beers and caning people until they bled. Half the roster looked like drug addicts, and the other half were. Rocky Maivia, meanwhile, looked like he had gotten caught in a beaded curtain and decided to run with it. When he started getting pushed, the fans weren't happy. That led to one of the most infamous wrestling chants of all time, "Die, Rocky, die." People were so angry that this bygone fossil of a character was on screen that they wished death upon him week in and week out. It's only natural when you realize he was the Barney of professional wrestling. When the WWF had finally realized that people weren't going to keep paying to see pig farmers wrestle plumbers, wish I had made either of those up, they updated a lot of their characters to fit the times, including Rocky, who joined the Nation of Domination. These were a group of black men who said the WWF was racist, which the company took every chance to prove correct. Rocky would shed the last name, and part of the first, to simply go by The Rock. And the rest is history. He would go on to become the World Heavyweight Champ 10 times, Intercontinental Champ 2 times, and Tag Champs 5 times. Despite wrestling being a predetermined sport, this championship portfolio does mean he was at the top of his industry. He wasn't the most dominant, like in a sport like mixed martial arts, but instead he was the person people wanted to see the most. The amount of time The Rock spent at or near the top of the company is indicative of just how popular he had become. He was one of the 2 faces of that era of wrestling, between him and Stone Cold Steve Austin. His in-ring ability had something to do with it. He was by no means a slouch athletically, but his charisma is what really got people to tune in. Opponents usually took a much worse beating on the mic than they would in the ring when facing The Rock. And it birthed dozens of catchphrases and t-shirts that made millions of dollars. So naturally, when it was time to wind down his wrestling career after the stresses of being a champion of this caliber, it made sense to lean on that electric personality even more in Hollywood. Before Rock entered the world of acting, you have what we like to call the good one, and then you have every other wrestler who tried acting. If you weren't lucky enough to be born Rowdy Roddy Piper, you were never gonna reach Hell Comes to Frogtown levels. The Rock would start strong with a featured role in The Mummy Returns and its spin-off, The Scorpion King, but for years was languishing in movies of little note, with flops like Gridiron Gang, Southland Tales, and Doom. It was during this time, in 2006, he would star in one of only a few... Oh my f***ing god, I'm so stupid. I could've just played Doom. What was I thinking? Okay, so I'm opening a fresh wound here. It wasn't that long ago I looked at Midway from this era and how they managed to flop on their face, largely due in part to games like the one we're talking about. Midway in the 2000s was a strange company. One with all the pedigree and talent to hang in the evolving industry, but none of the know-how to make it happen. They ruled arcades. To list what they've accomplished would take forever. When arcades dried up, though, and people took their money back home, they struggled to find out what to do with themselves. Designing games for the home versus arcade are two completely different fields, and philosophies from one will not work for the other. Nobody is going to sit down at Dave & Buster's to play The Last of Us, and Time Crisis doesn't feel right if you're not in a kind of dirty bowling alley. You see games like Freaky Flyers and think, are you in the right place? One of the only series they had that seemed to balance what the studio knew with what it needed was Spy Hunter, based on the 1983 arcade game. A precursor to endless runner games of today, Spy Hunter saw you blasting bad guys in a high-tech car, with guns, gadgets, and the ability to transform into a boat. Spy Hunter would be one of Midway's biggest arcade hits of the 80s, topping multiple months as the highest-grossing arcade machine, and even having one of the few truly great transitions onto home consoles with the NES port. Midway wouldn't do much with the series through the 90s, but would revive it in the 2000s for a PS2 spit and shine. Spy Hunter PS2 found the sweet spot between arcade and console, that led to one of the sole success stories coming out of Midway at the time, selling over 1 million copies across the PS2 and Xbox. Both then and now, there weren't really games catering to a single-player car combat experience. If you get one now, it's likely to be Twisted Metal-inspired arena combat. Spy Hunter took the direction of an action game set entirely in a car. Spy Hunter and its sequel, Spy Hunter 2, weren't game changers or anything. I mean, Spy Hunter 1 dropped on the same day as Phantasy Star Online 2 and Silent Hill 2, but for what they were at the time, these were some of Midway's biggest hits. So when it came time to continue the series with a third game, Midway would sign on The Rock to give the game the feeling of a big-budget movie. The Rock is more featured on the box than the car is. In their death throes, Midway became obsessed with adding celebrities to their games, a move as frugal as it was successful. The tombstone doesn't make for a very interesting twist, does it? Spy Hunter with The Rock, Stranglehold with Chow Yun-fat and John Woo, The Wheelman with Vin Diesel, all three games leaned on Hollywood glitz and glamour, and instead got blacklisted. While the other two Spy Hunter games managed to do well for themselves, the eventual Spy Hunter 3, called Nowhere to Run, would flop hard, not even getting close to half of what Spy Hunter 2 managed. The lasting legacy of this game is just as a funny joke The Rock made at the 2017 Game Awards while promoting Jumanji.
You were in the game too.
Yes, I was in the game. Yeah, Spy Hunter, classic Midway game. Dun, 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 dun. 2006. I'm still loving my 3 out of 10 review from Game Informer, by the way. 3 out of 10.
Okay,
thanks, guys.
that's all right, fine.
I'm pissed at that.
Does this game deserve to be looked at for any other reason besides shitty theme month puns? Let's find out. A story rundown of Nowhere to Run would just be around 2 minutes of listening to me waste air. This game's story is paper thin. It's nearly translucent. When John Carmack said story in a game is like story in a porno, this is the game he was talking about. You play as Alex the Rock Decker, a spy working for the good spy organization who has to take down Nostra, the evil spy organization. The game tells you about half of these details before skimming over the rest. It takes an hour and a half for somebody to say the main character's full name. There is no setup to establish this world before you get set loose in it. I was expecting at least a villain to say something like, the great Alex Decker, just to clue us in, but even after finishing the game, I don't know half the main cast's names. The scenarios that make up each level are completely detached. What happens in one scene rarely influences the next. You'll go from an underground base, to a jungle, to a city with no explanation as to how or why. Not even a map screen showing us how we're getting to these places. That's the least you can do. At first I thought it was because this is the third game in the series. Maybe you're just supposed to know by this point. Which, I guess makes sense, but even then, people who are just picking this game up because The Rock was on the cover are gonna be confused. Except, this game and the previous two Spy Hunter games have completely different main characters, who are still both named Alex. It's not the same villain, not the same supporting cast. I'm surprised they remembered to put the car in the game. The game throws bad guys at you like you're supposed to know who they are. Like a mid-boss against this evil agent lady who shows up, says nothing, and then leaves. Or the final boss of the game, this cyber soldier who shows up in the previous cutscene by accident. In the boss fight just before this, he crawls out of a tube and then doesn't show up again until the next cutscene, where he's introduced for the first time. I think this was a shoot fuck-up. What this game tries to pass for a story was so confusing, I had to do further research. I had to find out what was going on and why the game was this weird. And wouldn't you know it, I hit the mother lode. The reason this game makes no sense is because it's only half of the full story. See, The Rock being brought on wasn't just to give players the chance to practice kissing with the box art. No, The Rock wasn't just signed on for the Spy Hunter game, he was signed on for the Spy Hunter movie. Spy Hunter was supposed to get a film adaptation in 2006 to coincide with the game. But various production problems, like script rewrites and dropping its director, would lead to it getting shelved. Funny enough, that director who would have directed Spy Hunter was John Woo of Stranglehold fame. So he still got to fail hand in hand with Midway like he was always meant to. Come to think of it, Rock couldn't escape either. He might not have had to have been in Spy Hunter, but in 2018 he was in the movie Rampage. So he didn't get out of being in a Midway movie, he just postponed it. With the movie being crib killed, that leaves nowhere to run in a spot that I don't think any other game has ever been put in. It's a movie tie-in game without its movie. When you look at it again with that understanding, suddenly the whole thing starts to make sense. The game doesn't show you how you get from one place to the next. That would have been in the movie. You don't know who any of these characters are? You would know if you saw the movie. Knowing this game pretty much had its plot jettisoned into space makes everything so much clearer. Seeing as he is the selling feature for the game, I also want to dedicate some time to talking about The Rock's performance. For being somebody whose entire image is based on his effortless charisma, Rock comes off in this game as wooden. This is a Rocky Maivia performance. 2006 Rock was still in a dead zone where he wasn't wrestling cool Rock anymore, but he also wasn't Terramana Tequila Rock yet. He was trying to be actor Rock, which is the worst Rock. His performance feels interchangeable, and nothing about it feels like it needs to be The Rock. He's really low energy, and the script he's reading from doesn't give him anything to work with.
Traffic was a bitch.
You said you took care of the scientist.
No, I said the mission was a success.
But she's still alive. How the hell is that a success?
Got her phone number.
I gave you an order!
To put a bullet in one of our own? No way I'm doing that.
It's as generic a spy movie plot as you can get, and in that, Rock is given nothing interesting to say or do. You'll forget a cutscene happened as soon as it's over. If you're going to have The Rock in your game doing wrestling move takedowns, write him like he just clocked out of a title match. He throws out a few quips, but he should be dressing down every boss he fights, calling them jabronis and dropping elbows. You can't tell me they wanted to play it straight in a game like this. Luckily, all of his lines in the game could fit on a sticky note with space left for a shopping list. Great investment, Midway. The rest of the voice cast is shockingly stacked with prolific talent who get nothing to do. Kerry Walgren, Steve Bloom, Jameson Price, they're all over the game. But if The Rock doesn't get anything good to say, what chance do they have? Shoutouts to the two main villains, though, who are voiced by the same guy doing a kind of different voice.
Gentlemen, Dr. Cyrus and I are glad you could make it.
Yes, as Project Phoenix nears completion, you will see we are putting your capital to good use.
Gameplay is divided into three major categories. There's hand-to-hand combat, gunplay, and of course the driving. When on foot, combat is your standard light and heavy affair with a grapple button and finisher if you stun an opponent. Combat is complicated. Not because of the inputs, no, there is no depth to be found here. And that can be a problem. You just have to mash light and end with a heavy to kill every enemy who isn't a walking tank. And while that isn't engaging, that doesn't stop it from being fun. Hits have a great feedback thanks to their sound effects being incredibly punchy and strong sounding. Especially the heavy hits that ragdoll the opponent and send them flying. Sending them into stuff like shelves will cause them to explode into splinters and scatter what was on them all around the room, which leads to a lot of fun environmental destruction. It's satisfying despite its simplicity. The highlight of the hand-to-hand combat, though, is the grabs. Not enough beat-em-ups let you play as a grappler. Being a super agent on a secret mission and still taking the time to mother effing bomb people off the side of a boat into the Arctic Ocean and hitting them with rock bottoms and crossroads is the absurdity I wanted from the game that it mostly fails to deliver on. As soon as the game gave me the option to toss people to their deaths, it's all I ever tried to do. And when I found out they can't even break out after some time to stop you from dragging one guy to the end of the level, I was even happier. Shame that some of the environmental traps for stage kills don't work. I should mention that I'm playing the PC port of the game done in 2009 by Steel Monkeys. Yeah, a port to PC 3 years after the game launched on PS2. Only in Europe. I can't explain it either. Midway was already dead by this point. Since it's a port onto what's nearly 2 decades more advanced hardware, I expected some issues and think this might have been one of them. They're much worse in the other 2 sections, but just keep in mind that if you're going to play this, I am showing you the worst version you can play. Gunplay gets introduced soon after, and unfortunately takes up a lion's share of the gameplay. It's standard over-the-shoulder shooting, but it's just not done in a very fun way. The main issue is how sluggish the aiming feels. Moving the reticle around feels like there are bungee cords on either side, making it hard to move without resistance. You're better off firing the gun preemptively and hoping that enemies run into your crosshairs, because you're not going to be able to aim before they move. The problem is mostly avoided, thanks to the game's enemy AI being suicidal with its movements, but when the game forces you to precisely aim, it's horrible. These little drone enemies are lucky they only show up about 3 times, otherwise I'd have a lot more to say in a much less kind tone of voice. Enemies are also shockingly strong, with HP totals that fluctuate between a few bullets and multiple magazines of machine gun fire. Look at this, I'm 3 mags deep and he's still fighting! Headshots aren't even a done deal. I would have been fine turtling up and going on a point-and-click adventure, but they either are very finicky or aren't in the game. Movement speed is also way too slow when using a gun, except when walking to the left and right. Strafing is noticeably a lot faster than straight walking, so for any speedrunners, try treating the game like a side-scroller and only use left and right. The game has a cover mechanic where you press up against a wall, but hell if I ever use it. It leaves you more open than just rushing at the enemies. which is how I handled things most of the time. Running at enemies will often provoke them to put their CQC to work to fight you hand to hand, which lets you back up and shoot them in the face. What I'm doing? This is Big Boss's will. That, along with enemies having terrible aim, is all that makes the shooting sections tolerable. If the enemies could aim, I would be a lot more upset, but as it is, I don't think the shooting is irredeemably bad. It is still fun to blast through bad guys with guns and grenades, and some of the weapons feel a lot better to use than the rest. The Uzi is surprisingly strong thanks to its fast fire rate, and the shotgun, which you get late game, is what every gun in the game should feel like. This thing is a cannon with a booming sound effect that sends enemies flying as ragdolls. Whenever I got the chance, I would use it. It would even make fights against the drones easier. The driving, though, should be what the game is all about. I mean, the only thing separating this from Uncharted is the fact that you have a super car. The last two games didn't even let you get out of the car, so it should be at least a 50-50 split between on foot and driving. More likely 40-60 in favor of the car. In reality, I'd say it's closer to 80-20 in favor of the on-foot sections. Driving has taken a massive back seat, which I guess makes sense since you want to let players get a good look at that rock model that you spent all that money on. Which makes it a shame that the driving is easily the game's best part. Now, it's not like that's hard. We aren't exactly competing with the cream of the crop here, but the driving is where the game is at its best. The driving controls are fine. Learning them will take a minute, and you'll quickly learn that accelerating isn't always a good idea. But the game does them well enough. You get a few different weapons to take out the bad guys, like missiles, machine guns, oil slicks, and tire spikes, as well as more sci-fi stuff like a chargeable energy shot. You also have this missile salvo that will slow down time to take out a bunch of stuff at once, but let me tell you this. The sluggishness of the aiming is tripled in this section. Your mouse has a boulder chained to it, and trying to hit one thing before the time runs out is hard enough. Going for multiple things? Not a chance. Luckily, I don't think it's ever required for progression, just to take out multiple targets at once if you want to. You can ignore it, but I don't wanna, it looks cool. The thing that makes driving so much better than the other parts, though, is how it keeps up a constant kinetic energy thanks to always being moving. You're going fast all the time. There are enemies crashing into you, explosions all over the place, it's thrilling. Where the other sections can feel slow because of the movement speed and aiming, these sections don't have that problem. They're allowed to be bigger and faster. It also gets more variety, since at certain points you can swap between a car, boat, and bike for different terrains and challenges. Boat and car are pretty much the same, but bike is much different, stripping away most of your weaponry in favor of a compact size and maneuverability. The bike isn't used as much for combat, but more turbo tunnel style reaction challenges, needing you to duck between different fences and sliding under lasers while being chased by a rocket, or chasing down a transforming train. See, on foot can't do anything like this. You ask for something interesting, they send out a guy with slightly more armor. Oh, the height of fantasy. The action is at its most engaging when you have to swap between these different modes on the fly. One minute you're in the streets, next minute you veer off into a canal and transform into a boat. For a game that clearly has its limitations, when it's doing what it does best, it's pretty engaging. Playing this makes me wish I was playing the last two Spy Hunters because the game is much better off staying in the car. The levels themselves are pretty good. Not a lot of sections that gave me trouble. For the most part, the on-foot sections, and driving ones, come to think of it, are just action-packed hallways. Move forward and you'll eventually get to the end. They can even include some cool set pieces, like this laser maze you have to get through by triggering pressure pads. I like how they give you the option to just barrel forward, only to reveal it's a dead end. Very anti this game, but a decent change of pace. There are some non-car vehicle sections as well, namely this spider tank that appears a few times as a mini-boss. You get the chance to pilot it yourself, and the battles you have with other tanks while riding it are some of the most thrilling parts of the game. staying on the move and getting your shots in while you can. Not bad at all. Speaking of which, the game does throw in a few boss fights against mostly forgettable grunts who only have names because there was a vacancy above the health bars. They do a decent job shaking things up, better than when the game gives you a turret and tells you to have fun. Somehow fighting the turrets is more fun than actually using one. The agent lady who I mentioned before confused me at first, but I quickly learned you were just supposed to shoot the platforms out from under her until she got bored and left. If you can even count it as a boss fight, the one before the final boss is easily the worst in the game. You just have to destroy these power cells on this tower, but there are enemies all around this circular room that can shoot you from any angle. There's no cover, there's way too many of them to take out before they take out you. The best strategy is to just plant yourself in one spot, fire at as many cells as you can, and hope that you can get to the other ones before you die. This was the section I replayed the most in the game, and I got real sick of it. The final boss is somehow even more underwhelming, as you have to shoot boxes to drop on his head and shoot them out of the sky before he can throw them at you. If you run out of ammo in the middle of the fight, I think all you can do is let yourself die to restart this Koala Kong boss fight. After that is just a tiny section in a plane that I had to keep restarting because the skip cutscene button is also the jump out of a plane button. But after that, Spy Hunter is done. One of the biggest complaints when the game came out was its lack of content. But really, after playing it for myself, I'd count that as one of the game's strengths. This game is a short 3-hour experience, and if I had paid a cent for it, I might be upset. But frankly, if you tell me a game is only 2 hours, I'm a lot more likely to play it. I love games that can be beaten only a few sittings, and if I have to keep coming back to it over and over again, it's just more likely I'll drop it. It's why I'm still not past part 1 of Baldur's Gate 3. You heard it here first, folks! Spy Hunter Nowhere to Run is better than Baldur's Gate 3! The game's completely disconnected method of getting you from level to level helps in this regard, since there's pretty much no downtime. It's just big action set piece after big action set piece. There is no cooldown, and that's to the game's advantage. Talking for this long about a game this simple has already been a challenge, so it wisely doesn't overstay its welcome. Spy Hunter Nowhere to Run is a complicated game to recommend. On the one hand, it's not good. On the other hand, it doesn't feel as bad as it is. I still had an enjoyable experience despite its lack of quality. I would say give it a try, but quit at the first sign of frustration. The game does not improve much past the first mission. It kinda just stays at a stasis point of 5 out of 10, and only dips above and below it for a few minutes at a time. If you don't enjoy it at first, just give up. You're not gonna come around on it. For what it is, a game that bleeds 2006 energy instead of blood, it's a very quick game with a lot of jank that I didn't have as bad a time with as I expected. Anyway, Rock's gearing up to be in his first good movie, that'll be exciting. Join us next week for another idea that I thought had more legs than it did, as we tackle Nancy Droon.